Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. My name is Bella Ralston. In behalf of Faber-Castell USA and Michael Stores, it is time for another fun class. And I love Wednesdays and I love you guys. Thank you for being here today. If this is your first time attending my class, so hello, and welcome. But to all our friends, welcome and hello again. Today's class is very exciting because we're going to revisit. It's kind of like a brush lettering 101 rewind. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the things that you may be doing or may not be doing when in your brush lettering that are actually hindering you from your progress. So, a little bit of backstory. I have fallen in love with the art of brush lettering 10, 11 years ago. And I tell you what, I'm not kidding when I say this. I saw it on social media. I saw this probably on Pinterest somewhere. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get this pen. I need to get this marker. What type of marker is that? So I did my research. I wanted to get that marker, that brush pen. And I learned that it was a Pit Artist pen from Faber-Castell, and I'm like, I need that. So I bought it, and I'm like so excited. I started doing my lettering, and I don't have a very bad handwriting, but so I'm like, I can do this. So I first tried my first stroke, and I tell you what, it did not look like the one in the picture. So if you are finding yourself in the same position as I was 10 years ago, please know that I do understand you because brush lettering is really very fun, but it can also be frustrating at the same time. So, welcome to revisiting brush lettering, the do's and the don'ts. I did prepare a little bit of things, graphics to help us out because I really want to get into all the topics that I want to talk about with you today because sometimes I can get lost in talking and especially we have a very limited time of an hour. So I want to get into everything. So, what is brush lettering? Brush lettering is actually a style of writing or a drawing that uses a brush pen or a brush like tool to create very artistic and flowing letters. It is often um, associated with calligraphy because in calligraphy, it is the style of lettering using a variety of thin and thick strokes to create these beautiful letters. Before we get started, I really want to talk to you guys about handwriting and hand lettering because I think this is one of the very first misconception that, you know, people often make a mistake about because when they think about brush lettering, they think about I don't have a pretty handwriting. I don't think that I can learn brush lettering. I will just let's just show this is not my best work, but I want to do just a little bit of sample. So that's brush. I'm going to use the same brush so you can see. Okay. That's my regular handwriting. So I want you to think about hand lettering and handwriting are two different things because when we talk about hand lettering, it is the art of drawing your letters. And when you're handwriting, this is just your plain script, can be a script writing or print writing, as you can see in here. Now, let's talk about I actually prepared 10 because these are some of the important tips and that I think some of you need to kind of like a rewind, refresh, everything that we know about brush lettering. So the very first one is inconsistent pressure. Inconsistent pressure, it's because in brush lettering, there are two fundamentals. These are the fundamental stroke. And as we talked about earlier, there's a thin and a thick, right? And to be able to get your thin stroke, this is your upstroke. Now, if you need a little bit of help with your brush lettering, if this is your very first time attending a brush lettering class, you can also look at some of the previous classes that I created for Michael. So we have that on Michael's YouTube channel. So we have the brush lettering 101 there. Today it's just a revisiting, but I will talk to you about everything that we need to refresh, everything that we know when it comes to brush lettering. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my chat, make sure that I don't miss any of your comments while we're doing this. All right. All right, so we go. Here we have it. All right, so first is inconsistent pressure. What is inconsistent pressure? It is failing to maintain that consistent pressure on the brush that can result in uneven strokes and inconsistent letter forms. Now I'm change my overhead so we can look at it. So there are the fundamentals, the thin and the thick stroke. The thin stroke, you can create your thin stroke every single time that you would write away from your body, right? So away from you, this is the thin stroke or your upstroke. This is the moment where you're going to use the tip of your brush pen to create the very thin stroke. So every time you do an upstroke, you would use the tip of the pen, and this is when you're going to apply very, very light pressure. Again, tip of the pen and very light pressure. Now, the next one, the second stroke, is your downstroke, or this is your thick stroke. Notice how I changed the position of my hand. We'll talk about this later. But the downstroke is when you're writing towards your body. And this is when you're going to use the tip plus the body of your brush pen. And this is when you're also going to apply heavy pressure. So to create that, apply some pressure to go down. Right? We zoom in just a little bit so we can really see. Yes, ma'am. Here we go. So let's try that again. Let's use the tip of the pen to create a thin stroke, upstroke, light pressure, upstroke, light pressure. Now let's practice the downstroke. Apply some pressure to create that. Right. So now the second one is incorrect angle. We just talked about how I hope you were noticing how I was holding my pen. So using the brush at the wrong angle can really, really affect the thickness or the flow of your letters, because practicing maintaining a consistent angle with brush lettering, it will really help you with your results. Now, how to hold your brush? We are very The grip that you use to hold your brush pen, this is a personal preference because we all hold our pens very different. I've seen some people hold it here in between, their pointer and their middle finger. Some even put it in the middle like this. So we're all different. Now, the way I hold my brush pen is not super close to the tip. Notice that, just enough like this. And this is what I called my tripod. This is where I want my brush pen to rest in this cave right here. So when we talk about angle, notice how when I was doing my upstroke, I was holding it, my pen is almost resting in my ring finger like this, because this way I have a better control of my movement and my brush pen as well. So let's try to do an upstroke and a downstroke at the same time. This is actually one of the basic stroke that we'll talk about in a little bit. So let's just try. So upstroke, remember to go very light and use the tip of your brush pen. So light. Now slowly go down to create a much thicker stroke and apply. Now let's try again. Go up, thin stroke, and go down to create that thick, like that. Another thing that I'd like to talk to you about when it comes to the angle of your, it's really hard to do this. Hold on, let's see. Okay. I'm going to try and do something here so we can see the full length. So one of the things that when talk about the angle is like really to get the thicker stroke or a really good consistency of your thick stroke, you want to hold your brush pen around a 45-degree angle relative to your paper. I'm going to show you an example of what's going to happen if you don't angle your brush when you do your thick stroke, because this is really important and a lot of people get this wrong. That is why they're having inconsistency from their thin and their thick stroke. I will show you an example and I'm going to apply pressure as well. Okay. So it's not like I'm not applying pressure. I will still apply pressure when I do my downstroke. But I'll show you a difference of how you can really see the difference from the thin and the thick. Now, the Pit Artist pen is really flexible. And you can actually pull the nib of the pen just a little bit to make it extra longer, to make it even more flexible. Now, that's just a personal preference, of course, but I just want you to know that you have that option. And for some of you that are joining us today, they're not familiar with the Pit Artist pen, you can actually pull the nib and it will have a fresh nib onto the other side, to the other end. So you can actually get two nibs in one marker. So if your nibs start to fray and you feel like you're not getting, a clean thin stroke anymore, then it's probably need time to refresh it, pull out the nib, twist it, and then have a fresh nib on the other side of this one. All right, so let's try this again when I talk about the angle. Thin stroke, like this. So I didn't change the way I angled my brush. Now I'll show you. I'll use the tip and I'll do thin. The difference from this to this is very big. So you have a better contrast from your thin and your thick if you angle your pen around a 45-degree. So hold it. You're still using the tip. So don't worry about it because you're still going to use the tip and apply a light pressure. And then now apply a bit more pressure to create that thick line. All right. The next one is rushing strokes. I think this is really important that we talk about this. In the beginning, I talked to you about what is the difference from hand lettering and handwriting. And I think this part right here is very relative to that because rushing strokes, brush lettering requires patience. I'm going to repeat that again. It does require a whole lot of patience. So rushing through your strokes can lead to a shaky lines and less control over your brush. So for example, I'm going to do my thin and thick. Now, I have been doing this for a very long time. So I've already built my hand and my brain are already coordinated and I've built a muscle memory. So basically, my hand already knows what to do, what my brain signals them to do. But the difference from the hand lettering and handwriting, I will show you today because this is one of the common mistakes that I'm seeing. With some of my students that are saying, well, Lay, how come my lettering is not improving and I've been practicing? The thing that's very important to understand is that when it comes to brush lettering, it takes one stroke at a time. So this is a regular handwriting. I will just write my name if I'm going to write it in strokes, in script, I'm sorry, right? This is what's going to happen when I start doing hand lettering. I will lift my pen and I will stop at letter L. I do it one stroke at a time. Another stroke. E, Y. Even with that, I start with that first and I add the loop. So when you do your hand writing, you don't lift your pen. You're just writing it as one stroke, lay. But when you start to do brush lettering, you have to take it one letter or one stroke at a time. Be patient. All right. I see that there's a question about for left-handed people. Let me tell you this. Brush lettering, when it comes to you guys lefties, is not easy because I have tried to learn it just so I can get a little bit of understanding what's happening when it comes to the lefties. And I tell you what, I had a hard time. But the same principle is that you have to go light when you do your upstroke, and you have to go hard or heavy when you do your downstroke. So very same principle when it comes to that. But I think I tried it. So I'm going to try and write my name. I'm not even kidding. So every time you would go down, I think this is hard. I'm not even going to try because you guys are very, it's really, really hard. I wish you could see my face right now. I was doing that. That was not easy. But the same thing to me, because I am a righty, one thing that I didn't say in the beginning is that I always tilt my paper to the left to write when I'm doing my hand lettering. Now, maybe with the lefties, you might want to try to kind of like angle your paper just a little bit, twist it to your right then. Let's see how that works. I'm just going to write it. So this is really hard. So same thing, angle your the way you hold your brush. So still don't hold it upside down, 45-degree relative to the paper. Still angled. I'm still going to do my E. So everything that I'm talking about will still be the same. It's just what's going to be the difference is the way you will hold your pen, but same things still. Heavy going down, light going up. Okay. So same. Okay. That you guys are the bomb. All the lefties out there, yes to you. All right. Next is neglecting spacing. Now, ignoring the proper letter spacing can make your brush lettering look cluttered. You have to pay attention to the spaces between the letters and the words. Now, let's look at this example right here of my name. So let's write the word love here. I'm going to write it two different ways so just we can see the difference, right? I'll go right here like that. So love. I mean, there's some inconsistency in the second one, but I just want to show you an example. Now, I don't think this is always the truth when it comes to spacing. Now, I have through the years developed my own style when it comes to hand lettering. I really love the bounce lettering style. And that is why I created a bounce lettering workbook for Faber-Castell. If you have a moment, you can also take a look at this one. This is not available at Michael's yet, but it should. I think it's coming to Michael's very soon. But this is one of my worksheet for Faber-Castell, we talked about bounce lettering in here. There's just some basic stuff. What is a brush pen and things like that, and how to hold your brush pen and things, and the fundamentals of thin and thick. Now, what I was talking about, the spacing in between letters, I think one of the common mistake that I am seeing is that when you attend a brush lettering class, the teacher or in the workshop, we're going to learn how to write individual letters, right? So we have letter A, we have letter B. Now, the problem with this is really good because you're learning the letters individually. Now, the problem that have seen is that when it comes to now composing your words, everybody's having a difficult time because the teachers don't share about the connecting lines in between each letter. So this is where the inconsistency of the spacing of in a word. So let's say for the word love, what I would like you to do is I want you to, in your head and in your mind, I want you to know that you're going to connect this letter L to your next letter, which is the letter O. So I have extended my letter L to here intentionally because I know that I'm going to connect my letter O. So you want to put in letter O. Now, how do we connect our letter O to the letter V? We want to add this connecting. That's your extension. Now letter V, heavy. How are we going to connect the letter V to the letter E? You want to add your extend like that. That's your extension stroke. And this one just like that. So now, as you can see, we have a much better spacing in between our letters because we have added all of these extra strokes to connect all of that letters. All right, the next one. Let's show another example. Let's see. Another inconsistency, what I talked about, I think we're going to see this later on, is that another problem with the spacing is that through the years, you're going to find your own style. And this is the honest truth. Maybe for a little bit, you're just going to have to take a look at the workbooks, some of the books, and some photos online to see some examples, how people are writing that, word. Another advice that I can give is choose one word or your name, so you don't have to choose a word, choose your name, and then, find the best style that you love and practice that style over and over again. I think it's one of common mistakes is that there's nothing wrong with copying, but sometimes what happens is that we consume so much content and that we want to create all of this. We want to copy everything and we want to try to do that style too. So what happens that we end up so convoluted with all these information that we're like, okay, I don't really know what I want like anymore. So choose one style and choose one word that you don't mind writing over and over again. And for me in the beginning, it was the word love and the word blessed. I've written these words so many times that I cannot count anymore. You can ask my husband. He's a proof to that. All right. So that's inconsistent spacing. Let's see. The next one we have is overcomplicating styles. I was just talking about that because sometimes starting with a very complex styles, like what I'm doing now, you see all these beautiful letterings with the hoops and the loops and all the swashes, there's many different terms for that. But to me, the most important thing is try to find a very simple style that you love. Let's say I want to write the word love, and I can show you that you can write this word love many different ways. So, again, don't forget the two fundamentals, heavy going down, or every time you're writing towards your body. So, you go light every time you write away from you. All right. So, again, repeat that in your head over and over until you build a muscle memory. So, let's write the word love. Heavy going down. Please notice how I'm holding my brush pen. It is 45-degree angle relative to paper. And notice how slow I am doing. Do not rush your strokes. So we have the word love. I will write this one with a different style. So as you can see, very similar, but two different styles as well. Now you're going to notice in here, your letters are in one space, right? And this one, look at this. My second one, this is called the bounce lettering, where your letters are almost bouncing. It's like writing, right? So there are some inconsistency of the size, the height, the width of the letters. They they are inconsistent, but I highly suggest that when you're just getting started, I would get started with a very simple, non-complex style until you get used to your thick and your thin strokes, because that is the hardest thing to practice and to get really used to. So just try to stick to one style in the beginning until you feel more confident and you feel more comfortable moving on to a different style. Now, next one is skipping the basic drills. This is really, really important. You need to practice the basic drills. And onto the left side of the screen, you're going to see I shared some of the very basic strokes that you can practice. And also, these are some exercises that you can just, practice first before you start writing your letters. So we start with the upstroke. I think the more you do your upstroke, you're really going to find the amount of pressure that you want to apply to when you're doing your upstroke. So your downstroke, we all know this already, heavy and using the body of the brush. Now, when you start doing your overturn, this is when you're really practicing the switch from your thin and your thick, right? Because you're going to, it's like a letter U upside down, but you have that switch in between your thin and then you start applying pressure. That's a really good practice stroke. And you can also do the underturn, which is the opposite of this one. You start with your downstroke and then you finish with an upstroke. You're going to notice that I am having a hard time until now to switch between my downstroke to upstroke. This is where I think this is my struggle. And, I want to be really honest with you because it doesn't mean that I have been doing this for a very long time, that I don't practice anymore, or I don't have my struggles. I still have my struggles, which is every time I would do a downstroke or I would give some pressure to my brush pen and then start going thin, this is where I'm having some inconsistency. And you really can see it here. So let's practice that again. I feel like I am much better when I go from light to heavy. I want to know in the comment section which part of this exercise are you having a harder time? Do you have a hard time from light to heavy? Or are you like me where every time I would go heavy, I am really having a hard time to go switch to my light? Yeah, heavy to light for sure. I am the same way. Sorry, I'm glad I'm not alone. All right, the next stroke that I want you to practice, and a really good one too, is a compound curve. So a compound curve is kind of like you start from a little bit of heavy here, just light, and you go light to heavy again. And then this is our struggle, guys, our heavy to light. And you can really see that switch. I'll start that again. Light to heavy to light again. Yep. The next one is your oval. So your letter O, heavy to light. I think this is a good practice for us, for everyone that is struggling like me from my downstroke to my upstroke. Oval is our friend. So one of the common mistakes that I'm seeing people doing with the oval is that they start from the side and then they finish like this. So start right in the middle. Begin your stroke in the middle. So when you finish, just like this. And also notice how when it's straight on like this, it's hard, much harder for me. So when I go slant, I feel like I have better chances of getting my strokes more consistent. So the basic strokes are upstroke and downstroke. The next one would be an overturn. The letter U is an underturn, and then the compound curve. And then next is we have a ascending loop. This is like your letter else, right? So kind of like a beginning of a letter H2. So that is why it's very important to start with the basic strokes, because one thing you're going to notice is that our letters are composed of these basic strokes. That is the ascending loop. Now, the descending loop is like this. So it's kind of like the letter J. Right. So these basic strokes, that is what our letters are composed of. And I want to show an example of that first before we get started with the number 7. I'm going to show you a letter A. Let's say, all right. Let's see. A letter A. So we practice our oval. Just like this. And then we have our downstroke like that. So oval plus this stroke is a letter A. That is why it's very important to do one stroke at a time. Now let's do the ascending loop, just like this. Florence, I'm using the brush pen from Pitt Artist Pen. So this is the brush. So that's our ascending loop. And let's do this basic stroke right here, right? So now that is our letter H. So the ascending loop plus your overturn is equals to letter H. So as you can see, basic strokes are so important because our letters are composed of the basic strokes. So one stroke at a time, one letter at a time, and then you're next thing you know, you're finishing a word. Next thing you know, you're composing a very beautiful quote already. So 7, this, I think we need to talk about this number 7 because it is very important, especially when you're using a brush pen, because brush pens are fun. It is a very fabulous tool, but it can get frayed very easily. Now, like what I said with the Pitt Artist Pen, you can lift it, twist it around, and then you have a different nib on the other, but not all markers do that. So, it can get expensive. But if you're not using the correct paper, it's really much harder for your brush pens. What happens is that when your brush pens starts to fray, what's going to happen is you're going to get really inconsistent strokes. You're not going to have a good contrast from your thin to your thick. So papers are so important. Now, I know that when you're practicing, you're going to go through a lot of pages and it can get expensive. So one of my recommendation, this is just my personal recommendation, and this is a paper that I'm using at the moment. This is the HP. I'm going to write it down so you can take a screenshot of this. This is the HP, just a regular copy paper, but it is a laser paper. And I believe this one has 32 pounds. So you're gonna see it. It's like a red. There's a red in the packaging. So it's HB Laser 32 pound laser paper. So it's very smooth. It's inexpensive, um, and it's a really good paper to start with and a really good paper to practice with. So I'm gonna switch the camera so you guys can screenshot this one. So it's the HP Laser 32 pound paper. That's a really good one. Um, so, Robin, your question, would a calligraphy pen work or is there a difference? Actually, no, there is not. So, when you're using, that's very wrong. I shouldn't say, I didn't have to say that. There, of course, there is a difference because, the calligraphy pen, are we talking about the marker of the Pitt Artist pen or are we talking about those old nibs, the old calligraphy nibs? I guess I should have cleared that out first. So this is the brush pen. I want to see if I have my calligraphy pen. I do have it in brown, so I want to show you what is the difference. So this is my calligraphy nib. This is very different. So the way it's going to work is you don't need any pressure in here. What's going to happen is that you're just going to find that angle because this marker is angled. See, so it's kind of like has this tip like that. So the way you would use this is very different from the way you would use a brush pen. So if you don't find the right angle, you're not going to find that thick part of the marker. So I must say that if I'm going to be completely honest with you, the calligraphy pen is really not my favorite. Now, some people really love that look. Um, and again, because art is subjective, we really have um, we like different things, each to our own. So calligraphy is different. It's all about the angle of the brush pen. It's the way brush pen works are totally different from the calligraphy pen. So as you can see, I'm going to show you a difference from the thicker. Obviously, you're going to get a much thicker stroke with the brush pen, just depending also on the way you angle and the way you hold your pen, and depending on how much pressure you apply to create your thicker strokes. So, but both are lovely. I mean, it's just very different. So, oh, the old calligraphy nib pens, those are just different beasts, but you're going to definitely get a variety of stroke from the thin and the thick line. It's just very different, super different. Other than the fact that you're going to dip it to get some ink, it can get really messy. Um, but I must say that I have fallen in love with that old calligraphy style as well. But it's just very different. I found that using a brush pen is what I like the best because I can create beautiful thin and thick strokes without having to really mess around with the ink and get messy. But sometimes messy is good too because I love playing with happy mess with the inks. But when it comes to lettering, I just want to create beautiful letters, have that thin and thick. And so brush pen is really the right one for me. Right, the glass dip pens are very different too. Most of the time I've seen they just create a monoline. So it's kind of like using a fine liner tip. So when you use those glass dip pens, it's kind of like having a bullet tip that will give you a very beautiful mono style lettering. That's why when we talk about hand lettering, there's so many different, there's a very big window, and I don't think a lot of people understand that when we talk about hand lettering, there's many different types of hand lettering. So brush pen or brush lettering is just one category of hand lettering. There's many different branches. So brush lettering is just one category of hand lettering. So the mono lettering, we did some previous classes with that as well, and we have that on Michael's YouTube. We have some real brush lettering using some real brush, watercolor brush. So those are fun. All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So next one is choosing the wrong brush. This is perfect timing, you guys. I want to show you just a few example of what Faber-Castell. Faber-Castell has a lot of different brush pens. So we have the Pitt Artist pens. We have the Albrecht Dürer watercolor markers. Aside from having different nibs, uh, these also have use or are using very different types of ink. So they're so different. And a new one also is the, but you're going to notice they're all brush pens, right? So different brushes, of course, will yield different results. So I have experimented using many different type of brush tips. Now, the same principle is that the fundamental stroke, you go light when you go up, when you're doing your upstroke, and you go apply pressure, or you go heavy when you do your downstroke. Same principle applies. Now, what's different is that the way the brush of the pen itself bends. So the way your downstrokes are going to look, it's just larger than the other. So I want you to experiment. I don't want you to go buy all the different brush pens out there, but I think it's also important to kind of like find the right one for you because we're all different. You know, I personally have really heavy hand pressure. Even when I'm writing, I really have heavy pressure and it is a struggle for me. And that's why I told you, you know, from switching from the downstroke to the light is a challenge for me. And that's why finding the right brush pen is important. So maybe try three different brush pens and see which one of these brush pens fits you the most. Because again, we're all very different. So I'm just going to try and show you some examples in here. Now, these are very different inks aside from the size. This is a water-based dye inks. The next one I'm going to use is a watercolor ink. This is the Albrecht Dürer watercolor markers. This one I have noticed the brush pen itself, the brush nib itself doesn't bend as much as the Gold Faber Aqua. So you're going to get different results. This one is the Pitt Artist pen, but this is a brand new one. Same India ink, but this is a much larger size. And same like the Albrecht Dürer, I don't feel like bending or the brush nib itself doesn't have enough flex for me. Um, so that means I have to really press down on that brush nib to really create a thicker stroke. And every time I would do that, I feel like I'm really putting a lot of pressure on the brush nib. And I feel like this brush nib is going to fray so easily just because I have a very heavy hand pressure. Now, this one is brand new from Faber-Castell. This is the super soft brush. And I think personally, this is a really good brush to start with if you are a beginner, because I have tried and play around with this. And this is also inexpensive. So, you know, if you want to practice your brush lettering, this is a really good choice for you guys. This is super soft black edition Faber-Castell brush pens. And I will show you a difference from the Pitt Artists. The Pitt Artists are amazing brush pens. These are my favorite. If I want a small to a medium size, the Pitt Artists are the best. Plus, they are India ink. They don't bleed through the other side of the paper, and that's why I love it. There's no smell, you know, there's no funky smell like that. Now, this is the new one, the super soft brush. I feel like with this one, there's not, it doesn't flex as much as the Pitt Artist pen. But if you are struggling with your upstroke, with your thinner stroke, and light pressure, I think that's actually a good thing for the beginners, the really, really beginners, because you don't get too much flex that it's going to give you a difficult time to create those upstrokes. Not having enough flex only means that you're going to have enough control over the tip of your pen to create those beautiful thin strokes. So let us try that. So upstroke. See, when it doesn't flex enough, I feel like I have better control. So if you need a small to a medium sized brush pen and you're just a beginner and you really want to get into lettering without breaking the bank, the black edition of the Faber-Castell is really a good option. Now, I want to share with you another pen that does not have a brush pen, but it will give you the same result, kind of similar to what we're getting using a brush pen. Now, stay with me here. I know it is a brush pen, or a brush lettering class. This one is called the Fudenoske Medium and the Fudenoske Hard. If you have attended some of the previous classes, I know I, spoke so highly about these two pens. And I'll show you the tips. Get in here so we can really see. It doesn't have a brush tip, but I will show you. The Fudenosuke hard is, again, harder flex. That means better control. The Fudenosuke medium will give you a much better flex. That means thicker, slightly thicker strokes. Um, but it will still be very easy to control because it is not a brush tip. I hope I'm making sense. I will just show you an example. So I'll show you the Fudenosuke hard first. So because it is a smaller nib, you're not going to expect to create that beautiful thick stroke, but I'm going to bring it closer to the camera so you can see that you will still have a contrast between your thin and your thick stroke. So you have a little bit. This it looks like the old calligraphy, like using those old calligraphy nibs, right? So this is the hard, Fudenosuke hard, and now I'm going to show you the Fudenosuke medium. Zoom in just a little bit more. Now, personally, the Fudenosuke are my new favorite brush pens to use when it comes to lettering, and also when it comes to my drawing or my doodles and my illustrations. Look at that. So you still have the thin and thick, but you have a much better control. So if you are someone, I've seen a lot of your comments, I struggle with that hard pressure, hard to thin. I think you're going to fall in love with the Fudenosuke medium. I personally, this is what I can personally share with you, recommend with you, is that Fudenosuke, try it. I know it's different. I know it's not a brush pen, but when you use the Fudenosuke, I think you're going to fall in love. But if you are a hardcore brush pen and you really want to get into brush lettering without breaking the bank, the new black edition is really, really good. All right, next one. We'll talk about the consistency. And this is, I think we talked about this earlier, but in a different topic. But ignoring consistency is key in brush lettering. Ensure that your consistent height, your slant, and your thickness throughout your letter forms for, of course, a more polished look. Now, this is not always the case because remember, I talked to you about the style of bounce lettering. So this is when trying to find your style. So consistency is not always bad. So it really is it just depends on your liking. You can have a bounce lettering style like this with inconsistent height of your letters. But as long, to me, the most important thing that I think I want to talk to you about today is that when it comes to brush lettering, the most important thing is that can people read what you are writing? I think, we can be fancy and include all the swashes and all that, but can people understand? what you're writing? Can people read it? So to me, that is the most important thing of all that you shouldn't miss is that make sure that people can read your letters because it's very easy to, put all those fancy smanchy swashes in there. But if people are not getting your message, then, what is the point of all of that? So just be consistent with your style. And I think that's it. If you want to do the bounce lettering, then you can do that bounce lettering. Oh, yes, yes. I'm going to show you that Fudenosuke. So I will write it down. I know it's a little tricky. So Fude, like that. So my Japanese friend, because I used to read this as Fudenosuke, but my Japanese friend that said that you can actually read it as Fudenosuke, but it's kind of like having a very excited tone when you say Fudenosuke. So it's Fudenosuke is the correct way of pronouncing it. So, all right. Last but not the least, I think we're almost to the last one, the lack of contrast. And so I think this is one of the common mistake, and I think also the hardest to do is that how do we get enough contrast from our thin and our thick strokes? um if you feel like if you are someone that struggles with this too and you say, you know what, Lay, I really don't think I can get the thin and thick. I want you to think about this. When you're not getting enough contrast from your thin and thick line, that means you're not going light enough. I swear, I promise you, this is where you're going to really see the difference is that really go light and use that tip to go really slow to create your thin line. So I'll try and do on the back like this. I'm going to write slow. So tip of the pen, go really slow. And now use the body of the pen and then go switch again from that tip and then go up, right? Now I'm going to apply some pressure for my L. And then even if you have to, let's say, stop right there because you're having a hard time, like myself, switching from the downstroke to the upstroke, then it's okay. Stop right there and then continue it again. So I'm going to go here and then go use the tip again and go up because learning a new skill, this is not a marathon. You know, this this is not an instant result. It is a marathon. So you have to go really pace yourself. Don't try to get instant gratification because it took me, let's say, and to be completely honest, maybe 2 years before I really saw that, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to share. But that's another wrong part of me that I want to share with you is that don't be afraid to share your progress. Another tip is that when you're doing all of these, when you're loose pages, the only problem with having a loose page lettering practice is that you're going to throw it away. So you won't see your progress because what's very important to understand is that do not compare your progress to someone's level 7 already. So especially if you're just beginning to learn it, um, please do keep in mind that the only person you need to compare yourself to is the person you were a month ago. So without having a sketchbook or a journal page or something like that, there's nothing to compare yourself to. So make sure to keep your practice pages to really see because you're going to look back and make sure to date it also, if you can. I don't always do it, but it's really nice to have a date because then you can really track your progress. And they see that, oh my God, look at that. I can really do my O much better this time than I was a month ago or 2 weeks ago or 3 months ago. So keep your practice pages, or better yet, find a notebook with a very smooth paper and keep that dated so you know what year was that when you were starting practicing. And then you can compare your own progress to your own self and not to anybody else that is online. So all right, I want to know if you guys have any questions for me before I leave you. Do you recommend dotted graph paper for practice? I really do recommend having a dotted grid or grid. It does help me. I personally love a square grid. Now, I know not that's not everybody's cup of tea, but I love a square grid. Now, if you're a more traditional you like the traditional look of hand lettering, because again we're all different, then even a composition notebook with lined paper or ruled paper will really help you also to stay in one line, to really have your ascender and descender in place. Have consistent height of your letter. Now, like what I shared, I love bounce lettering, so my letter goes up and down and it's like dancing, right? um where can I get alphabet practice sheets, like the smaller case and upper cases? You know what? I don't think that we have that anymore. But if you probably Faber-Castell will have it on the website that I created some sample lettering sheet. We should have that on the website. So fabercastell.com. Make sure to check it out, please. Um, okay. So yeah, I hope that this class was inspiring and I hope it was helpful. That was my goal because I personally know the challenges of learning a new skill, because when I first practiced hand lettering, I really didn't know anything at all. So I am a self-taught. I'm a self-taught artist when it comes to doodling as well. So if I did it, I have no doubt that you can too. So, from someone who didn't know how to draw, someone to created teaching my class now, and also created some worksheets to help out um, everybody that same like me, where I was 10 years ago. I know that you can too. Just those important things that we talked about today, make sure to revisit all those, just refresh, and just practice, enjoy it, because sometimes it is the process that is more important than the final result. Because enjoy yourself, don't compare it to other people. I know it sounds cheesy, but it really, really is true. So kudos to you for being here today, for wanting to learn, and sharing your creativity and sharing your time with us here at Faber-Castell and Michael Store. My name is Lay. I had a wonderful time, and I hope you did too. I hope you'll be able to join us again for our next class. We have a fun class again next week, same time, 5 o'clock. Make sure to visit michaels.com for schedules for our classes and events. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Until next time, stay creative and stay happy. Bye, everyone.